What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another Angle Up Pursuit podcast. Today, Brian and I are breaking down the DraftKings slate to get you set for the Daytona 500. Who should be in your lineup? Who should you avoid? What kind of strategy should you take? All of that on today's Angle Up Pursuit podcast.
Ross Chastain used the wall all the way around this racetrack.
Logano has been the class of the field.
Check out the big brain on Brad.
Yeah, I need to change my underwear.
Brian Twining, it is Saturday. The duels are done. Qualifying is done. We are all but set for hopefully a Sunday race, assuming Florida doesn't get pounded with too much weather. But we are here to talk all things Daytona 500 over on DraftKings. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, but I can already tell you from the weather forecast that I've seen, there is absolutely zero chance in my mind of this race happening when it's scheduled to go down. I'm fully expecting a Monday or quite possibly even a Tuesday run here, because Monday they're expecting spattering of rain as well. So it may not be a Monday Marty party as we're expecting.
You know, at some point we got to realize that, like, when we can't have February races in Florida. Like, I know that it's the Daytona 500. I know there's a lot going on, but like, I feel like this is a thing we've been experiencing the past couple of years, and it's something that I think they're going to have to like seriously consider adjusting, because you can't put a roof over the Daytona 500. So,
however, they can do some type of like retractable, like tarp type of thing if they really got tricky. I'm sure engineers could build something to where it doesn't enclose the stadium; it just kind of covers it, or so. Like, do something to get this freaking race in, because the amount of rain postponements and races that have been affected by weather the last couple of years is becoming disgusting.
Yeah. A few quick notes before we dive into everything and kind of get you set for DraftKings. Those of you that have been with us for a couple seasons know we've adjusted our schedule a little bit. So we're not talking betting today. We're just doing DraftKings and DraftKings only. We do have a Substack that is in the process of being figured out. We had one created, and now with something, technology got in the way, and now we can't access it. So I will have a link down in the description, as well as we will tweet it out. It is completely free to check out. You'll get our final betting card. You'll get some DraftKings, our favorite DraftKings values, as well as maybe an Underdog Pick'em or two. Those will all be in the Substack free newsletter. You are able to pledge if you want to, but don't feel compelled to. It's completely voluntary, and it is completely free. We will also, hopefully, fingers crossed, have a GridRivals fantasy league. And if you aren't able to get into it for Daytona, don't worry. The lowest score is dropped, and we are going to be giving out a $100 gift card to Fanatics for anyone who wins. Now, you do have to beat Brian and I in order to claim that prize. So you got to get first. But if you get first, you will take that down. We will send that to you via email, and you can get yourself some cool NASCAR gear for the next, I guess, 2025 season, or maybe you want an NFL jersey or something. I
think it's also important to know with GridRivals, it's free to enter. You don't have to deposit anything. Like, you're just there to compete with us, competing for that $100 Fanatics gift cards. And the game that it is, they're launching this new thing, leagues. You have to build a roster with salary constraints, and they actually increase or decrease in value depending on their performances at races. You sign drivers to durations of contracts. So, we have 2 super speedway races coming up here. I think the minimum that you can sign a driver is 2 races. You can try to get some lower priced guys that are going to probably perform well at these tracks. Let them go, sign different drivers as we head into the 1.5s at Vegas, and then the shorter tracks, Phoenix and such and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm excited to dive into there. I did some diving into the league and all that type of stuff, and it's pretty cool. Like, if you want to play real fantasy NASCAR and be your own general manager of a team, this is essentially what that league is.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. And like Brian said, completely free, and you get a chance to win a $100 gift card. So it's a win-win-win situation. working on getting the link and information from GridRivals. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at FPAOP. We will have all of our links out there. We will get you the link to the Substack. We will get you the link to GridRivals. We post all of our content. We share a lot of good quality content by other creators in the space, a lot of information, to build your lineups, to build your betting card, to do all that stuff. So definitely let us know if there's anything that you'd like to see in the newsletter as well. Like this is a brand new thing we're developing.
Yep.
So if there's stuff that you think would be helpful for your making your final decisions on Sunday morning, definitely let us know. We can try and get that set up. Without further ado, Brian, let's dive into DraftKings. Let's look at some prices, and while we do that, let's talk about the duels and kind of qualifying and all of the stuff we've seen so far. Because obviously, coming into the race, we didn't have a ton of on track time. There's no practice.
Yeah.
It's just okay. We qualify, then we do the duels. There was some expectation that maybe Toyota had figured some stuff out, and after qualifying, that didn't seem to be the case. But after we saw them perform in the duels, including a win in a duel by both Toyota drivers, Christopher Bell and Tyler Reddick, winning duel 2 and 1 respectively. Little more optimism for Toyota. Ford was definitely set up to qualify on the front row with Joey Logano getting up there, getting on the pole. The RFK boys were very much happy to sit in the back of the pack during the duels so they can make sure their car made it to the front. A few notes. Ryan Blaney, Kyle Busch, William Byron, and Noah Gragson are all going to the back after the accident in the duel number 2, and that was pretty gnarly. But I guess, Brian, for you, from what we've seen so far, are you shifting how you think about this race? Do you buy Toyota more as a legitimate contender? Like, kind of, where is your head at as we head to Sunday?
The Toyotas are here and they are gonna make noise, folks.
Yeah.
You could clearly see they have taken a step up in performance at drafting tracks. I know there was far fewer cars out there for the duels. I mean, it was like half the field, but they were the only manufacturer that was routinely pushing forward, passing tons of guys. They were the ones that were creating the lanes. They were punching the holes through the air, getting to the front. And you saw it in both duels. You saw 2 Toyotas win the duels. You saw a guy who has never really performed well at super speedways and Tyler Reddick win duel 1. Like, I think it was really telling to see that they have made the concerted effort to change the way the car performed aerodynamically at super speedways and their ability to push. And that has definitely changed. Ford's, I think the verdict is still out because duel 1, I believe they only had like 4 or 5.
Yeah, they were all stacked
in the field,
duel 2.
and then they were all in duel 2. But also in duel 2, you had, in my opinion, the best super speedway guys in the Toyota camp in that duel. So, I mean, it's a little harder to tell because they were facing a little bit tougher competition than the guys in duel 1. And then the Chevys are just the Chevys. Who the hell knows what we're going to get from them? We know how good their cars are, especially Hendrick and all that stuff. But yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me for qualifying practice duels has got to be the Toyotas. They're here to stay. They are going to be legit contenders at super speedways. And, I think that segues perfectly into the top price guy, Denny Hamlin, who, I mean, interestingly enough, he's on record of saying like he's going to race the Daytona for himself, not necessarily do what team orders are. Like, he's in it to win it for his own good. And I don't know if that's going to take away from his potential, but as teammates, I'm sure there's something a part of them that are thinking like, you know what, F this guy. If it comes down to it at the end, like, I'm gonna move him, or I'm not gonna help him either. So,
Yeah, we saw in last year, like Denny's all about Denny, and Denny will do whatever he needs to do to get Denny where he needs to be. And obviously he's in a weird predicament because he's got his teammates, but he also has his race team, and he's gonna push the 2311 guys and get them to a spot. And we even saw last year him be a little more leaning towards 2311 than his own JGR teammates. So a little just way to think about this race, you definitely want to load up on guys starting in the back. You definitely want to load up on. You definitely don't feel bad if you leave money on the table, even if
No.
it's a sizable chunk. Like, build the best lineup you can. That's not to say you can't use guys starting near the front, but a lot has to go right. They have to be one of the best drivers. They have to contend for the win. Our guy iFantasy Race, I tweeted it out a little earlier, has a nice little chart that shows kind of the top scorers at Daytona and kind of where they started. The majority of the top 5 options are somewhere between like 25 and 40.
Yep.
A lot of guys in that mid to high 30s. There is options like a Chris Buescher, who started 9th last year, Ryan Blaney, who started 7th in 2022, who were, in that kind of 5 to 7 range. None of them, like the Denny Hamlin 2016, who started 11th, is the only person who was the leading scorer. And that usually means they get to the front, they stay at the front, they dominate, they win. It's not something we usually see at super speedways. So there's a lot more risk with guys like that. Obviously, you can mix a few of them in. There's going to be some interesting kind of mid-pack guys, starting in that, low 14, 15, 16, somewhere in there to maybe high 20, low 20s. So think about that as you're building lineups. So let's talk about it. Denny Hamlin, only 10K driver, starting 8th. Ryan Blaney, starting 32nd. And as I mentioned, we'll be going to the back. So I think he's probably more like 38, but I guess, a relative, it doesn't matter. We expect, at Daytona, where you start doesn't necessarily,
Yeah, it means
isn't
nothing.
indicative. He is going to a backup car. So we'll see what that looks like, as well as Kyle Busch, who's starting 34th. Kyle Larson starting 17th, Chase Elliott 5th, Logano, as we mentioned, on the pole. And then the RFK boys kind of round out the end of the 9Ks as we dip into the 8Ks there. So I guess, kind of where's your head initially lean, and who's jumping out as potential values, as, even though we're spending what we're spending, could be like, oh, okay, even given what they cost, it's still a nice value.
Yeah, I think the two chalkiest plays of the weekend are going to be Ryan Blaney and Kyle Busch, and there's no question about that,
Yeah.
because you saw what Kyle Busch did last year when he had to go to the back after wrecking. I believe it was in one of the duels, and he made his way towards the front. He was leading a few laps. Him and Austin Dillon were right up there for the win late. And then Ryan Blaney, we all know his successes and late failures at super speedways, but even if he has to drop to the back of the field, actually start 40th, that's not going to affect your place differential potential on him, because you can expect him to be, up there beating and banging inside the top 10 when it comes down to the end of the stages, and hopefully towards the end of the race, as long as he avoids the big wreck. Now, one interesting pivot, though, is that knowing that those guys are going to be so heavily rostered, there is a way to leverage that. And if you avoid them, obviously, if you're in a cash lineup, you're probably going to have them in your roster, because they're going to be, they're going to be owned in 75+% of lineups. But if you're playing
Yeah.
GPP, that you're probably going to see the majority of people looking at them, because they are some of the best super speedway racers. When you can get similar type of place differential from the back markers, who are just able to try to avoid wrecks, and if they move up 10 spots, like, you're guaranteed 10 points from one of those guys while saving 5K in salary,
Yeah.
essentially.
And chalk's, relative, right? Like, there's going to be good chalk, there's going to be bad chalk. Do you think Kyle Busch, a guy that we expect to perform pretty well, who's had had some really good results, but also had some bad results, second full year with RCR, do you think that grabbing, like, because there's always ways to get different. You don't have to get different at all of your spots. You just get different
Yeah.
at one or two, and all of a sudden your lineup's very different. Do you think he's good chalk? And then same with Ryan Blaney. Do you think, are these guys that maybe you don't use, or maybe you do use both of them? Like, how are you utilizing, and if you're using one or the other or both?
Yeah, I think personally, because I don't build a plethora of lineups. Like, I'd normally try to build like just a couple. Like, I'm not a huge DFS player, but because I'm doing that, I try to get a little bit different from other people, to try to increase the probability of me profiting a little bit more than I would if I just played it completely safe. So personally, I'd probably pick one or the other. I don't want to have both in my lineup, especially if I'm only making, 2 or 3 lineups this particular weekend, which at Daytona, I mean, just like betting, it's probably safe to, stay on the sidelines. I think they're both good chalk because they're both really good. That said, just like in the betting, in betting this race, it's literally anybody's race to do good. Anybody can wreck out at any single moment, and you really don't know, which puts more value on saving salary and getting different from people because also too, I think it's important to note this is the biggest race of the sport, and there are going to be a lot more people playing in these contests that don't normally play NASCAR DFS, don't normally bet NASCAR, that don't pay attention to the sport at all. They're just going to dive in here because it's the big event of the weekend.
Yep. Yeah, I'm in on Blaney and on Bush. I think I might, mix in a few different versions of them. I'm not 150 maxing either. I definitely look for like 3 max, 5 max, single entry, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That is how I like to get down. But as you mentioned, there is going to be a lot more other people just kind of gravitating in. So I might be a little more willing. If you have something like an optimizer, you might want to look at what that optimal lineup is and figure out ways to get unique off of that. Because, a lot of people that don't typically play NASCAR DFS are going to run the optimizer, are going to throw it in a few lineups and see what happens. So, if you can find unique pivots off of maybe 1 or 2 spots while still putting a peak score without having all of the ownership, I think that's a really interesting way to attack it. Larson's somebody that I'm not really sure. Obviously incredible driver. We have questioned kind of his, results, I guess, at super speedways. Looked pretty good in the duels. Obviously Team Hendrick is a team that dominates qualifying and has done well in this race in the past. So, a lot of reason to be optimistic about him. I think the RFK boys, Kozlowski at 16 and Buescher at 19, are 2 very compelling options. I don't know if I'll do like split them up or if I want to use them together. But I think they both make a ton of sense at their price and are starting to get into that range where it's like, okay, the price plus where they're starting makes a lot of sense as people that I want to have some exposure to.
Yeah, and I think guys like them are probably a little bit better to play in the 3 max or in the lower max things, just because more people are going to probably go for Kyle Busch and Ryan Blaney. Now, that being said, Kyle Larson is like the most polarizing driver when it comes to super speedways. You have some people who want to try to take advantage of the fact that everyone knows hasn't performed well in finishing results at these tracks, whereas other people, they want to completely avoid him. Yeah. So when you look at people that are building lineups and they know who's good at these tracks, most people who maybe don't do this all the time or are going to create a couple lineups themselves, they're going to avoid Kyle Larson. Now that's a good leverage play because he's probably going to be low rostered and not many people are going to have him.
From what I've seen, he's supposed to be pretty popular.
Well, and from a DFS perspective, though, I mean, normally at like a 1.5, Kyle Larson's probably the most rostered guy, regardless of starting position. Yeah. Whereas at a super speedway, even if he's starting middle of the pack, you're probably looking at 20-25% max ownership, in my opinion. So if you get off of Blaney and Busch in a GPP, which are probably going to be 30-35% minimum because of where they're starting in the field, you do lose place differential potential with him, but you have the same potential of wrecking and the same potential of improvement, but you're getting that leverage off of everybody else.
Yeah, no. And it's, we're going to have some serious decisions to make. So I'm just pulling up, seeing if I can find some other ownership just to kind of give myself
I think it's important for people too, to pull the shade back a little bit on Kyle Larson at super speedways and realize like finishing results at these tracks don't necessarily mean how good a driver had been. I mean, when you look at Larson's last couple of results, they suck on paper, but he had been up front mixing it up, coming to the end of the races for wins or, good finishes, top 5s, top 7s of that nature. So he's not a terrible super speedway racer. He's improving. And he's such a good driver. at some point you have to expect him to break through.
Yep. And like I said, he looked good in the duels. He's been a guy that's been competitive. Even last year, it looked like it might be the year that he finally figured it out. And obviously ended up not having the race that he expected, but was pretty solid. We'll have to make some decisions. And obviously, we'll build probably 2, maybe 3 lineups at the end of this just to give you guys some ideas of kind of how we're building and what we're thinking together. You can always drop questions down in the comments. We will loop back sometime before the race starts just to answer any questions. And the easiest way is on Twitter at Notorious Caro, at Brian_Twining. That is the quickest, fastest way to get access to us. We will happily talk it with you. DraftKings picks, betting, NASCAR general stuff. A lot of smart people on there as well. So feel free to come find us. We'll chat for sure. Let's round out the rest of the 8K range where we have some interesting options. William Byron starting 18th, but as I mentioned, we'll be going to the back. Most tracks, I don't really love that, but at a super speedway, I think I could find myself getting there, especially if people find themselves being like, he's starting 18th, but he's actually starting 38th, and I don't know that I want to get there. Bubba Wallace starting 24th. We talked about the Toyotas. We know how talented he is at super speedways. He's a guy that traditionally does really, really well. His 2311 teammate obviously won one of the dual races. There's a lot to like about Bubba starting 24th, 8400 or 8500. Christopher Bell 8300 starting 4th. Hard to get to. Love what he can do, but basically I'm not picking anybody starting. Denny's maybe the only guy starting inside the top 10 that I could even convince myself is worth taking a look at, and even then it's kind of hard. I think the lower, as we kind of go down here, it gets really interesting too. Truex, somebody that I've become a lot more optimistic about in the next gen car at super speedways. Starting 27th, we talked about the Toyotas. Very excited about what he could do. 8,200 is a very easy to make work price. Ross Chastain starting 21st. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. obviously won the race last year, starting 35th. I feel like he'll be extremely popular. But he is it's weird with him because he's obviously thought of as a super speedway guy, won the 500 last year, but he's still Ricky Spinouts. He still ends up on the side of the road. He still has all kinds of issues, and he's definitely not into Hendrick. He's not into JGR. Like he's in a lower quality car. So there is enough that I think will suppress him just enough. But obviously, given where he's starting, it could be very, very easy to get there.
Yeah, and so I wanted to ask you on that. So of those last 3 guys that we just talked about, Truex, Chastain, and Stenhouse, why would you pay up for Martin Truex Jr., who's starting 8 spots ahead of Ricky Stenhouse, who, when they both, literally everybody has the same probability of finishing a certain spot. Yeah. When it's Ricky Stenhouse who has a Daytona 500 win. It's Ricky Stenhouse who has 3 wins at super speedways to Martin Truex Jr.'s 0. It's Ricky Stenhouse who, is starting at the back, but everybody knows this is his Super Bowl. Yes, it's the sports Super Bowl, but these are his Super Bowls. Why would you pay up for Martin Truex Jr. when you're getting a guy that's starting 8 spots further back and has the same, if not higher, expectations for performance on this track?
Those are all extremely, extremely good points. And maybe it's just like the natural contrarian in me to go, well, if this guy has this and that and this, obviously he's the pick, so I should go this way. It's very good. I'm curious to see how the ownership actually stakes out. From what I'm looking at right now, Truex seems to be a lot more popular. Stenhouse is starting farther back, as you mentioned, has better results. I think
too, I think there is something to be said about the fact that last year when Stenhouse won, most people in the betting community had finally decided to jump off the train, and it just so happened it was the time he popped. So that probably left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. DFS also, for what it's worth. And so maybe people are looking at him like there is no way he can put together 2 consecutive performances of that nature at the biggest race of the year with all of this pressure on him as the defending champion, which could push his rostership percentage down at a point to where he's actually a good leverage play.
You know what? I think you're right. And I'm looking at kind of it's fun to go on Twitter and just Google DraftKings plus or search for DraftKings plus whatever driver you're interested in
Yeah.
and see what comes up, because I think there is, like, it's weird because, like, Truex seems to be gaining steam as somebody that people want to use. A lot of projection systems have him somewhere around the top 5 drivers. I think you're onto something. I think we should be pivoting to Stenhouse, and maybe Truex is better in a outright betting where he's still priced at a good number. You don't have to worry about other people being on him, and this is all relative, right? If you're doing cash lineups and you want Truex because you feel a little safer about him finishing the race, you don't necessarily need him to win. Maybe that's a better way to lean. But if you're in tournaments, if you're trying to go for first place, Stenhouse could win the race. Stenhouse is going to probably have lower ownership, maybe a sizable lower ownership, and as Brian mentioned, is starting further back. So a lot of it pushes you to Stenhouse, and maybe that's what we should do. And I should stop overthinking it, because I think you're right. I think we should just.
I think the fact that he does have an 8-spot advantage when it comes to potential place differential really plays a key role in this selection, because, I mean, even if Stenhouse is caught up in the first wreck of the race, you're only losing the max amount of placements you're losing is 5.
Yeah.
If Martin Truex Jr. is caught up in the first wreck, you're losing 13 spots. And this is also a guy who isn't necessarily deemed a great super speedway racer. He's not known for these types of tracks. Yeah, he's improving and he's gotten better. But I mean, this guy is in the swan song years of his career. Like, it's not like it's going to click all of a sudden to where he's just going to turn into this super speedway maven. Whereas Ricky Stenhouse Jr., for his entire time in the Cup Series, it's always been known when we go to these tracks, this is where the expectation is pushed up on him, because this is where he excels.
Yeah, and maybe people are convincing themselves with Toyota's, performance in the duels.
Yeah, Toyota looked great, but
that's another thing in his camp where it's like, okay, I could see myself.
But you're not going to get all 9 Toyotas to like finish up.
You're certainly not.
That's just not going to happen.
And if you look at the outright market, Truex is, 20, 25.
And that's where Stenhouse is, isn't
Stenhouse is like 30. So you're getting, but that, let's go to top 10. I don't think it's going to be as sizable. Truex is plus 175, minus 125 at like DraftKings. BetRivers, if you have access to that, is nice. And then plus 125. So, like I said, I think Truex is probably a little safer, or at least mentally makes you feel a little safer. But I think you're right. I think Stenhouse is the play in that range. Tyler Reddick not in play just because of where he's starting. Jimmy Johnson, I have no interest in. Like, he's a Hall of Famer for a reason, but like, we wouldn't play Michael Jordan in NBA DFS or like Joe Montana in NFL DFS if they came back. So let's move on beyond there. Eric Jones, Alex Bowman, Ty Gibbs, Austin Dillon starting 33rd, I think is interesting.
He's sick. It could be the flu race.
Yeah. So maybe he is, maybe he's just not into it, but maybe that's the thing that gets him across. I don't know. I do think there is a world where you want to set up the RCR cars together. I think this is a good race where if you trust JGR, if you trust 2311, if you trust any, like, you could get.
Yeah, I think it's imperative to at least get 2 teammates in this, because more than likely they're going to find each other at some point during the race. And I think Dillon and Busch starting right near each other.
Yeah.
I think from the get-go, the plan is going to be, all right, we're going to link up and we're going to try to stay connected as long as possible.
Yep. And our guy Chris Wermy pointed out, which is a good one, David Reagan made the race. Another, going to be with his Keselowski, going to be with Buescher. Just another guy who, if he gets near the front, could be a pusher. So, we'll talk Reagan here in a second, but he's an easy guy to place in. Even if you don't use both Keselowski and Buescher, maybe you use him with one of them. and you kind of hope that he's there helping push him to the end. And if he gets third or fourth or even seventh, like you're pretty happy with the results. Yeah, so Austin Dillon, I'm with you. I think is interesting. I like Chase Briscoe. I don't know why I always fall for that. I feel like Lucy in the Charlie Brown football, but I always find myself gravitating towards him at shorter, flatter, and at super speedways. I think he's a fine play, especially given where he's starting. I think he'll be very overlooked. I don't think a lot of ownership will get to him because he's starting a little too far forward for I think a lot of people's comforts. So I'm happy to get there at 7,100.
I think he does present some possibility of fastest laps too, because at super speedways, especially like Daytona, the guy leading the lanes, he's not going to be pulling the fastest laps. It's going to be the guys that are in the middle of these trains that are on 75% throttle that are actually putting in the fastest lap. So guys in that range offer that.
Yeah, and some of the guys near the front, if they get caught up in lap traffic, if they get caught up with the back of the field as they're coming around, could also have be slowed up. So I think that's a good point. Ryan Preece starting 25th is also pretty interesting. I could find myself getting there, and then Josh Berry starting 30th at 6,600 is fine. David Reagan, as I mentioned, starting 40th, 6,500 in an RFK car. I think there's a lot to like. And easy piece to mix in with, a Keselowski or with a Christopher Buescher.
Yeah, and I think I'm interested to see. I'll have to try to look up this data to see what his roster percentage winds up being for the race, because when you looked at the duels, he just kind of hung out in the back and he didn't really show much speed. But I wonder if that was almost by design.
Oh yeah,
for
no,
RFK.
all of the RFK cars were basically told to stay in the back because they didn't want to wreck their cars and ruin their have to go to a backup. So
because I mean, when you're talking about super speedway racers, like Brad Keselowski is amongst the best. He's probably the best pusher in the sport. And so, if Reagan winds up getting in front of him and say he's the link that's connecting Buescher to Brad Keselowski, like Reagan's going right to the front with them. I mean, hopefully that's at the very end, because if this happens in the middle of the race, that presents some possibility of wrecking. But guy like Reagan, 6,500, starting 40th, the only way he can go is up. And even if he's involved in the wreck 5 laps into the race, I mean, what are you losing from him?
I really like the next range we get into after Nemechek with Gregson starting 38th, AJ Allmendinger starting 28th.
Love Allmendinger.
As I mentioned, had to have a top 20 bet on him, or a top 3 bet at 20-1. I like him quite a bit. Looked good in the duels. I think we'll be fine. It was really frustrating because I got to Dinger and to Truex, and they both were like basically leading halfway through the duels, and then with the pit stops and issues, and then obviously ultimately wrecks, they all kind of got shuffled to the back, and it didn't end up cashing, but that's okay. Our guy Corey LaJoie starting 29th, 6K, I think makes a lot of sense as well. I could see him being pretty popular for this range. I think Dinger will be kind of popular too, but I guess I'm a little more
go down to LaJoie over Dinger.
Yeah. But I could see people getting 6K, 6,200. I will say I feel better about being on the chalk with the expensive guys rather than being on the chalk with the cheap guys. I feel like a lot of people could mix in some LaJoie and some Dinger, into their lineups where you could get to a Justin Haley or Todd Gill, and they're not as fun. They're not nearly as sexy. But if they come with a fraction of the ownership and they have just as high of opportunity to perform pretty well. So I would think about kind of how you're building your lineups. If you're a little more chalky at the top, then someone like a Dinger or a LaJoie or both might not make sense. Where if you're get a little more unique with your expensive options, it's easy to put those in because, as I mentioned, don't feel like you have to be unique across the board. Just find 1 or 2 spots where you can kind of differentiate. And maybe you instead of going, you end up getting to a Stenhouse. So then getting to a LaJoie or getting to a Dinger is definitely a lot more comfortable. Don't be afraid to get in here. Obviously, no BJ McLeod, no JJ Yaley.
My favorite guy is the least expensive
McLeod
player on
looks
the
so
slate.
good. I mean, for BJ McLeod, he obviously wasn't going to dominate the race, and poor guys out there without any sponsors. We got to reach out to him and see if we can get a big old AOP logo on the front hood. That'd be incredible. I mean, what's it cost? Like $20 to get on a BJ McLeod
we
ride?
have to sell our houses.
I think it's fine.
Yeah. So,
Harrison Burton, 5,400. Todd Gilliland.
No interest.
Yeah.
Look,
my
favorite play on the entire slate is Riley Herbst.
Okay.
$5,100, starting at the very rear of the pack, almost. Dude had a top 10 last year in the at Daytona.
Yeah.
He was good at Xfinity Series in super speedways. Rick Ware Racing has been really damn good at super speedways throughout their history. Like, what else is there to like about a guy that's starting at the back? He's not going to get a lot of attention from the newer players that are probably going to be flooding these contests.
Yeah. No, I think he's a very good call. Lower ownership, easy to get to, easy to make a lot of lineups work. And will be our first click into our first lineup. So let's make it happen. Brian, we'll build a couple lineups. I'll build, there's a 3 max, like $3. So we'll build 3 lineups. I'll put all 3 in and we'll obviously review them on our betting preview show. So you can always check back to see how we did. If we end up winning the millions, then we'll talk to you later. All right, Brian. So if Herbst, obviously first click in. I went up towards the top. Do we want Blaney or Busch? Do we want to do some RFK action with Keselowski or Buescher, and then maybe mix in some Reagan? Where's your initial leans kind of pulling you?
So, I mean, it depends on how contrarian we're trying to get. But like I had said when we were talking about those two guys, I think we have to have one or the other, at least. Okay. Blaney or Busch. Like they're going to score points.
I think. Let me see here.
I mean, I will just say from a fan perspective, clearly I prefer Ryan Blaney over Kyle Busch, but they're both great plays because not only are they going to move through the field, but you're also going to get fastest laps potentially because they are starting at the back.
Yep. I think we go Busch, and I think we pair him up with his RCR teammate.
Love it.
Austin Dillon is down here at 7,300.
All right. I like it.
I do. We talked about this Reagan call.
Did you want to just do all the RFK guys?
I don't know that let's
think about it. Keselowski and Buescher are going to push each other to the front.
Yeah. And that leaves, and that's we talked about ways to be different. Leaving almost 4K on the table is definitely a way to be different.
One thing I do notice about that lineup, which is absolutely terrifying, not a single Yoda.
Yeah. That is a little terrifying. All right, let's save that lineup, and we'll create another one. All right. So fresh slate. Do we want to mix in some Toyota? Do we want to?
It's really hard to get to the Toyotas though because they all qualified so well. So you have the issues of falling back.
So I think the names that make sense if you want to get in some Toyotas. Bubba,
yeah, he's going to be chalky for sure. But
starting 24th. I think Denny is sort of interesting. Starting 8th. I know it's scary because of where he's starting, but that could be good. It's weird because, is he going to be popular because he's a big name and people know him, even though he's starting 8th?
Okay. So something I have yet to consider, and I recorded a different podcast last night. What kind of effect will Denny's DFS rostership have because of Netflix? He's already been on social media saying he's picked up thousands of followers. Now you're probably going to have people new to the sport diving in here to play DFS or betting that are going to be like, oh, Denny Hamlin, let me put him in my lineup.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's won the race and he's been really good. Yeah, he's probably somebody to avoid. What about some SHR stuff? Some Gragson or Briscoe or both?
I'll start with AJ Allmendinger. I'll let you make the decision on the SHR guys.
Allmendinger. We could do Priest and Briscoe too.
I actually don't hate that. I mean, I like Ryan Priest at super speedways.
Yeah. And yeah, I don't think he'll be super popular, and I think a lot of people won't double him up, so I'm gonna do that.
All right, yeah, I don't hate that.
We could do some Toyota with. I mean, Ty Gibbs is also interesting. I know he's starting 15th, but
a lot of people are not going to be on him because
if we think he can move forward and be a top like 7 car, I think there's a possibility that he's pretty solid. Let's see here. So,
would you put him with a Truex though?
yeah, I think you'd want to, or at least with Toyota, and have like a Bubba Wallace or something with him.
I mean, you could put him with Joey Logano.
You could.
I wanted to get your take on that real quick. Would you ever play the pole sitter at Daytona in particular?
No.
In DFS?
No.
Like, I don't think I could ever get there personally. Like,
no, I don't honestly like I said, I don't want anyone starting inside the top 10, even as no matter how good they looked, just because there's so much nonsense. Now maybe that will be but like I don't ever think it'll be someone you have to have in order to win. Like obviously there will be guys that start inside the top 10 that have strong performances that are worth what you pay to get them in. But I think the needle you have to thread with somebody starting that far forward is so small that it's not worth the gamble.
All right. So what if, because we talked about them and I actually liked one over the other, what if we add Truex and Stenhouse? You keep scrolling past them. Top.
Oh, there's Stenhouse. There's Truex. Okay. Yeah. Why decide on
one open spot?
Yeah, and I think this is where we get a little chalky and go Ryan Blaney. Although, once again, we're just kind of ignoring the Toyotas.
Well, we got Truex. I mean,
we got Truex. That's true.
Dude, it's because it's so hard to get to the majority of the Toyotas outside of Bubba Wallace, who is going to be extremely rostered.
I'm going to put Blaney in. I'm going to save this lineup, and I'm going to create a lineup, and I'm going to force us to pick 3 Toyotas.
All right. Well, then I'm going to force us. We have to have Kyle Larson.
Oh, God.
Exactly. This is great. This is brilliant.
Okay, so let's go. I think we go Bubba. I think we go Truex.
Ooh, you're going to double up on Truex, though?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I like him. I know it's scary. I know he's a chalky, but I think there's ways to be unique around him. Like where he's starting, what his potential is. Like, give me another Toyota that you like more. I mean, I guess we could pivot out of him in the other lineup, but
yeah,
Gibbs.
I think he's the grossest. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. I like gross.
All right.
All right. That gives us 2 more spots.
So I think we need to have another HMS guy to go with Kyle Larson.
William Byron.
Yeah, because he's the one starting the furthest back. Yeah.
And I think enough people will get off him because he has to start in the very back, even though he's like, I think between him starting in the very back, but only getting credit for starting 18th and starting 18th, I think enough people will kind of avoid him. But maybe
we're gonna do it. Go all the way to the bottom. We got to go with my fellow Italiano, Anthony Alfredo.
Good God.
What do you like? Think about it. He's starting at the back of the pack. As long as he's not, like trying to mix it up early, he's gonna turn laps, and
Yeah.
he is basically the embodiment of BJ McLeod this race. We
So
would have had
you like Alfredo over Herbst and over Hemrick?
definitely over Hemrick because
Okay.
Hemrick is more likely to be mixing it up early, trying to move forward. I think it presents the possibility of him wrecking much more so than Anthony Alfredo, who is simply happy to be there. And he'll probably just, I'm telling you, he is going to be the BJ McLeod of this race. And we would have had a ton of BJ McLeod because his wreck avoidance is like A++, and he would have just turned laps the entire time and probably finished 23rd.
All right. Well, there's our 3 lineups. Don't dupe us. We'll be throwing these in a couple of contests and seeing what we can get and figuring it all out. I did bring up Underdog to see if we can't find any value. Obviously, with qualifying and everything in the books, I wanted to see if we had different thoughts. It really doesn't seem like Underdog's changed too much, but I think there could be some potential value. So Ryan Blaney starting 8th or finishing position above 8th. So I don't like. Can he get to top 7 given where he's starting? I think so.
Well,
But
yeah,
it
I mean,
seems a little.
he could win a stage.
That's true.
Like he could be there at the.
Logano's hard to fade even with that lower price tag. Ross to top. Can he get 11th or better?
Is he going to be there though, or is he going to wreck coming to stage 1 because he's trying to get stage points?
That's what I'm worried about.
Exactly.
Keselowski has to finish 7th and Buescher has to finish 8th.
So I was just going to say, I think the ones that stand out most to me are like, I like Larson to top 10.
Do you like him to top 9? And
Well,
like
yeah.
he's
he's got to finish
scary too because I feel like you want to go lower on all of or worse on all of these.
You just literally make different parlays of worse.
Yeah, because like I feel like they're gonna like you're just waiting for them to crash and then you cash it.
Yeah.
But the names that there's names that we genuinely like. We saw what the Toyotas could do, so like Christopher Bell's a lot more compelling.
I will say, I think
Byron has struggled, and you mentioned it on the betting preview show about his struggles.
William Byron doesn't have a single finish of 20th or better at the Daytona.
Yeah, we just put him in our DraftKings lineup. What are we doing?
Because it's all about place differential and potential. That's the difference. DK, like DraftKings, especially for this race, is much different than betting. Like I'm not betting William Byron to top 10 because there's no value in that.
Yeah.
Because his price is so inflated based off it like last year's performance and just his level of driving that you can't there's no value in betting him.
Yeah. I mean, you could fade all of the Hendrick guys. You could target all the Hendrick guys. Kyle Busch, even starting where he is, finishing.
Like I like Christopher Bell. He's
You like him better?
Yeah, he's one of my favorites to win.
Top 8. Okay.
I think between Keselowski and Buescher, I think one of them is going to be finishing near the top 5.
Yeah.
You just have to think that.
I want Brad.
Yeah.
And then we just have Logano out crash. You can picture Logano talking to Jamie Little with his Coke in his hand, just being like, it's just a super speedway and a bad day, and like
he's just gonna say, "Yep, typical super speedway." I don't know why we're racing these things anymore.
Yeah, especially when
he's
Ty
like
Gibbs
probably the most
him.
outspoken person against this style of racing.
Yeah, but
and then another one too, like I almost feel like a lot of people are probably going to look at Blaney and say there's no way he could back up championship performance with a good performance at the 500. He has such bad luck here. He lost his chance to win a couple years ago when he let teammate Austin Cindric bully him when all he had to do was be an asshole and he would have taken the 500.
Yep.
Last year he got in a wreck. This year he got in a wreck during the duels. Like I think Blaney is like a perennial top 5 threat at the 500 at the end.
So I'm pulling up top 5 odds just to get some vibes. And like right now, it looks like Logano and Keselowski have the best at Caesars.
Well, who has the? I do like your idea of fading people that have like the lowest finishing projection.
Yeah.
So like Denny and Logano, maybe just going worse.
But like they're the two ones that are basically like in theory like the safest. Like their odds to get top 5 are the lowest.
Yeah.
Although DK has, well, I guess no, it's just their Caesars has like way better odds than DK, and that Caesars aren't even that great. But like Kyle Busch to top 5 is now like has moved pretty significantly. So if you like Kyle Busch, if he puts top 10, he's minus 225, which is better than Chase Elliott, better than Kyle Larson, better than Chris Bell. Buescher is definitely below Keselowski, so I feel better going with better Keselowski, even if it's just one spot. What's Byron? Byron's pretty far down there. He is a guy that you could fade if you wanted to fade. See, like part of me is like, oh, just fade Larson, fade Byron, or you get on board with both of them. I think Hendrick figures stuff out with those two guys, and like, I feel like those two guys could be the reason we win DraftKings, but don't, their median outcome, their average outcome is like 14th.
Yeah, that's very true.
Kind of like that.
I mean, I'll just say there's not a lot of confidence in betting or playing driver positions like this at Daytona.
No.
I mean, it's not going to get much better at Atlanta, although I do think that race is a little more predictable, but we're not going to be getting into, where data analysis actually plays a huge part until we go to Vegas.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why things like these are really fun, because you can get 20-1 on, a 5-banger, but that's a lot of risk, even if the reward is nice.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, Blaney and Busch are two that jump out to me, but like given where they're starting, it's a little more worrisome. I don't feel like we're getting that good of a number. Like, could we get Kyle in the top 9 and Blaney in the top 7?
I mean, but then we're trying to pick four.
Yeah, and then with Bell and Keselowski, that's why I
of
think
the
we
top
need to have
9,
guys
like,
outside.
Like that's rough.
Yeah. I think this is fun.
Oh my gosh.
I know we're fading some of our favorite drivers, but like I don't unless we just want to fade average ass Chase Elliott instead of
Watch, Chase Elliott's gonna win, by the way.
Yeah, probably.
Which would not hurt me because I bet him over 1.5 wins for the season, so I'd be okay with that.
I bet him over 1.5 and over 2.5.
Oh, see, there you go. So we actually want him to win, Kyle.
Well, there's a bunch of races. We don't have to have it decided in week 1.
I mean, ideally, the best win would be Brad Keselowski because I'm sitting on that over 1/2 at like even money. So, I can get behind that for sure.
But like because you actually think he's going to not perform well, or because
I mean, it's a combination of two things.
Yeah. Don't let your fanhood impact.
Yeah, no. I mean, the fact that no pole sitter has won the 500 since 2000, I mean, is really telling. It's really hard to win from that spot.
Yeah. And I like Chastain and Byron, so I don't really want to root against them, but those both feel like of the ones that are quote unquote like worse position. Although Ross, I could see like getting 11th and completely screwing me.
All right, so what if you just do a 3-banger? We get rid of you do two worses and one better. So who do we have more confidence in, Christopher Bell or Brad Keselowski? finishing better than their positions?
Kozlowski.
Okay, so drop.
But
I'm just saying for higher
yeah,
probability of
smart.
hitting.
Yeah.
And then what do you have higher, like William Byron versus Ross Chastain?
I mean, given track history, the answer is Byron. But given his run last year and being a part of Team Hendrick and just kind of the evolution he had, I feel so much better about him. And I also worry that Ross is, he's willing to be aggressive, and that
I was
could
just
be.
going to say, also, I think it's important to keep in mind friends.
Yeah.
You need friends who are going to push you and aren't going to be a-holes to you at the race.
Yeah.
Which
So
neither Chastain
Keselowski,
or Logano have many
Chastain.
of.
What's that?
Which neither Chastain or Logano have many of.
Yeah. And Brad K doesn't mind making friends, so if you wanted to fade him, I wouldn't be bad either.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say, you could probably go under on all these guys.
Yeah. But I don't know. I trust RFK, and they were so good at speedway tracks last year, and I think they were clearly dogging it in the duels.
Yeah, I'm not worried about.
Okay, so this is going to be our Saturday morning pick'em. Keselowski better, Chastain and Logano worse, and I'll put this into the newsletter.
Let's go.
And we'll see what we can do. So make sure you are subscribed to the newsletter. Like I said, we'll tweet it out. We will once we get it sorted out. It's technology. Like I don't know. I feel like as the older I get, the more I'm turning into my boomer self, where I can't figure out technology for some reason, even though I've great with technology. I don't understand. So we'll get the newsletter sorted out. We'll get the GridRivals thing organized. Maybe we'll just push it till Atlanta. That way nobody's getting caught behind and people aren't getting screwed. So we'll get that set up. So you guys can join that. As I mentioned, $100 gift card to the winner, assuming you beat Brian and I. If not, Brian and I will be getting us some new Bush Latte hats or something cool.
I'm still waiting for that Bush Light watermelon flavor.
Yeah. And Ross Chastain getting the Bush Light with the watermelon, I think is classic.
That would be so sick if they
I'm very very excited to see how that pans out. So good luck on DraftKings. Like I said, drop questions down below. Follow us on Twitter if you have questions you want some feedback on. If you're building lineups, we're happy to give you some input. We're happy to give you our thoughts. You can use it or not use it, however you want to use it. Make sure you are liking, subscribing, doing all the things, sharing this show around. It really does do a lot. For Brian Twining, I'm Kyle Robert. Enjoy the Daytona 500.
Whenever
we'll be back in your feed on Wednesday to get you set for Atlanta, as well as recap all that was Daytona. And then we'll be off and running, and this season will be over before we know it. Enjoy your Sunday, and we'll talk to you next time.